things within this discussion. It'll be a short discussion, half hour to 45 minutes. And the two things we're going to be going over are chapter 4 of the book on how to read and remember. Most of the things that we read and remember, because we haven't been trained in how to learn, we've been told what to learn, but never how. That's the problem with most schools and education, is they tell you what to learn, but not how. So that's how we're going to be going over, which is the focus on chapter 4. And then the other thing that we're going to be going over is the believer's trials and tribulations. We've been going over the 40 hadith by Imam Khomeini, and we're on the 15th hadith. And how do you know in regards to how do you look at trials and tribulations? I'm going to go over it shortly in this clip, and then next week, Sunday, we'll go deeper into it. And then after that, it's patience, the 7 virtues of patience. How do you know if you're really patient, and so on? So the hadith in question, let me just put this. It says, it is mentioned in the book, all that of mankind profit undergoes the severest of trials. And after them, the other believers, and after them, they elect to the extent of their nobility. Indeed, the believer undergoes trials in proportion to his good deeds. So the better you are, the more you are tried in life, which is somewhat, reverse to what we typically think. Because, if you have a boss that favors you, he usually will allow you to get shortcuts and so on. But when you're favored by God, he tries you more. So that is indeed because God Almighty did not make this world a place for rewarding the believer and punishing the unbeliever. This world is not for rewards and punishments. And one whose faith is feeble and whose good deeds are few faces fewer tribulations. So here's the irony. The more you go against God, the more you go against other things, God basically ignores you and allows you to be. God, there's a narration where God would give all the disbelievers everything that they wanted. But there's a reason why he doesn't, just not to discourage the believers, because this world means very little. But we're not made for this world, it's for the next. Verily tribulations hasten towards a believer with greater speed than rainwater towards the earth's depths. So the more that you get, the more closer you get to the divine, the more closer you get to Allah, the more you're going to be tried. So the interesting thing with that, the more trials that you pass, your love will increase by people. But what's one thing that will also increase? Who could take a guess? If love will increase, the closer you get to God, love will be increased. But another thing will also be increased. And who could take? Andrew, you want to take a stab at it?
It says it right down there, hate.
Hate. Oh yeah, it says it there. So hate increases. The closer you get to God, people will love you more, the better people, but people will also hate you more. And if you look at all scriptures, the Jewish scriptures, Christian scriptures, Muslim scriptures, all prophets were killed by amongst their people. They were killed by their own people. Majority of them. Go ahead, Andrew.
You're saying hate, external hate will increase.
Hate of people will increase. It's just a natural thing. Like, for instance, Andrew, as you grow, as you accomplish more things, you'll find people that will love you and encourage you. But you'll also, because you're raising, what are you naturally going to find? People that are going to
envy you.
Envy you, bring you down.
Okay.
Look at prophets of God. That's what happened to them. It's just the nature. Look at you. If you're hopefully you're in a happy marriage, and if somebody who's jealous of that, unfortunately, what they will try to do, because they're miserable, they would want you miserable too. That's why you have to be very careful of the toxic relationships that you're in, if any. And
Raj, they might also question the more trials you get. People might think, the majority really, they think that you must have done something.
yes.
You must have something for God to punish you.
God's not happy with you.
Yeah. And there's subhanahu wa ta'ala, there's a hadith from Imam Ali alayhi salatu wasalam, when it says how there was a question from one of the companions, how would you know where is God is punishing you and where is it trying you? And then the answer was, you can tell of the outcome. A person who's been being tried with calamities, who's been, their faith has increased, that's where is a trial is. A person who are being tried, who gets denounce Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, gets impatient, that's of those who are being punished.
Correct.
So they could get closer to Allah, not because of
even within Prophet Ayub, Prophet Job was had a lot of trials, and the people questioned him, saying God must not be in your favor. Actually, that's the only way to know if God is in your favor, is you're being tried and you're able to test it. Now, God's test is not like a math test. A math test that you're given, you're not learning new information. It's discovery if you know this stuff or you don't. But the test that God gives you not only is for discovery, but it's a real life examination for you to elevate yourself at that point. And then most people, if you notice the same trials and tribulations keep coming in your life, it's because you're still stuck at the same test. And that's the key. And for you to pay attention to that. Last week, any questions on that? Just quickly, and then next week we'll go deeper into it. If you have any questions, just please speak up. Last week we went over, there's 4 types of the digital age, the things that it's happening. And one comment, and I'll just quickly go over it. Somebody that learned their whole life in the 15th century, all that information they gave is the same of what you learned today. Meaning your one day of information that you're intaking is the same as somebody from the 15th century, they did their whole life. We have information overload, and therefore we can make the comment that ignorance is now a choice. It's your choice to be ignorant. And if you're spending 8 hours, if we're constantly spending information, consuming information, then it's bad. You want to learn how to be okay with being bored. It said take 30 minutes of white space where you're doing nothing. I'm going to go into that. We used to say be right back, digital distraction. People who used to do the AIM, instant messenger, used to type in BRB. I don't know if you remember that, Andrew. But now we don't say BRB. Why is that? Because we're always on. Right?
Yep.
We're always on. We're never shut off. That's why they say go to your notifications, shut off all your notifications, Instagram, Facebook, etc. Digital dementia. Before we used to memorize 200 phone numbers, we can't even memorize one now. And if I ask you how many phone numbers you have memorized, you say maybe 2 or 3. Where before it was 200. GPS. When you type in the GPS and you go to a certain place, then you ask somebody, do you know how to get there? If I were to take you back, you have no idea. So we've taken our free will and we've put it into these devices. So this book is really good at taking that free will back and building that muscle again. Because remember, the muscle around the brain is willpower. So chapter 4, we're going to go over it. It talks about the forgiving curve. So after 1 hour, let's say if you read something or you're listening to a presentation, 50% of what you learn after 1 hour is forgotten. And then if you don't review it within 24 hours, 70 to 90% is forgotten. So imagine you're spending hours doing something and then you realize what was it for? You don't even retain it. It's because you've never been taught how to learn. If you listen to something or do something for more than 40 minutes, so let's say you're listening to a lecture. See, I have a problem with all of these Ramadan lectures or people who will speak for an hour, hour and a half. You're not going to remember 90% of it. And when it goes over 15, 20, 25 minutes, you remember the first part and the last part, nothing in between. So it talks about one of the quick tips is whenever you're reading or watching something or learning something, do it for 25 minutes maximum. Then take a 5-minute break and then go back. This is why cramming doesn't work. Cramming doesn't work because you remember the first time. Anybody ever try to cram for an exam and then you get an E? It's because you can't remember. The brain doesn't work that way. But
I gotta see, Hajj.
Effective ways to cram. Yes, Hajriya.
I said I gotta see when I try to cram.
Yes, Bob been in there. So, oops, let me go back. what else? There was the last point of, okay, we talked about if you read a book for 2 hours, you only remember for the first 20 minutes and last 20 minutes. It's never good to do things for long term. Your brain eventually shuts off. Okay, this talks about a quick start, so it gives a lot of useful hints. This quick start was, as you're reading this book, when your mind inevitably wanders into something else. So usually our mind wanders when we're doing things, especially for long periods of times. So what you resist persists. So if you keep resisting something, it's going to persist. For instance, if I tell you, don't think of monkeys, Ajirihab, try not to think, or Sister Mehreen, try to not think of monkeys. What's the first thing that you're going to think of?
Monkeys.
Monkeys. Try. It's impossible not to think of a monkey.
Mhm.
So the tip that it gives, it says, keep a notebook close by. Let's say you're listening to a lecture or you're reading something, but your mind is on, somebody cut you off, or your kids, or your coworker, or your financial issue, whatever it is. It's saying, don't fight it, but write it down and say, I'm going to get back to it. What it does, it gives it a temporary release, and then you're able to focus better. So it's a great tip. I wish I had that when I was younger.
It's true. I tried it when I'm serious. I have so much in my mind.
Right.
Reading this Limitless, it was such help. It made everything seem so, I can visualize things that I could not understand. So the point is where I have so many things going around. When I start putting things, write it down.
You write it down.
Yeah.
There's so much science to show that when you write something down, you're unemployed, you want a job faster at 60%, just write down what kind of job. And we've talked about that in the past. Haji Rihab, as you know, is on the board of Amr. She's the founder of Amr. It's a foster care agency. Because what happened to her, and we're going to talk about the why, you have to have a purpose, is her kids were taken from her illegally. One of them had brittle bone disease. It passed away, and they claimed abuse, and all of her kids were taken away. And hopefully next week she'll share her story. But ever since then, she's been advocating for kids who are voiceless, for kids who have been abused, for families who have been their kids taken away illegally. And she's been on this path for the last, I think, how many years now? 25 years. She had a constitutional law passed. It's called the Amr Act, where if your kids are taken away, let's say from a Christian home or a Muslim home, they better be in familiar conditions. And we'll talk more about that next week. So he uses a lot of acronyms, and he says, this is the way you learn faster. And he gave 6 tips. It's called the FASTER method. So the F is for forgetting. The FASTER method talks about the forget the things that distract you for laser focus. So meaning, let's say, when Isa returns or the Imam returns, and now he's telling you what to do. But if you have a set stone of beliefs and you question it and you can't let those beliefs go, you're not going to be able to focus on his return. It's impossible. So that's why kids are the best learners, because they're empty vessels. They don't have these preconceived beliefs. So whenever you're about to learn something new, the book talks about forget all your beliefs for that moment. Can you do it? And it's because right when somebody talks about a different religion or talks about a different concept or talks about some different attitude that you should have, your past beliefs always get in the way. He says the best learners are the ones that are able to suspend their beliefs and just consume. And then after you reflect on what's healthy and what's not. He says so many people can't do that. What they'll do is they'll learn something for a year, spend the next 20 years teaching the same thing. And you ask them, how long is their experience? Well, I've had 20 years experience. Actually, they haven't. They've had one experience, 1 year. And we want to make sure we don't fall victim to that because of our limited beliefs. Just because what our parents taught us or what other people taught. We talked about what resist persist. Temporary suspend beliefs we talked about. Forget about your limitations. Forget about your limitations for the point. Like, what are our limitations? We're not good enough. We can't read. We're not going to finish this book. We're not smart enough. I can't keep up. It says just suspend it. Don't give that attention. He says stop fighting for your limitations. Because if you fight for your limitations, when somebody says you are smart, and you fight against them, it's like when I counsel people and I give them the solution, and they'll argue against me. But what happens is if you fight for your limitations, you get to keep them. So what limitations are we fighting for? We have to be careful for. If you
That's
go ahead, Andrew.
so big, so big to saying like when I came out of addiction, then I started to get into the technical world. My first instinct was to think, there's no way my brain can learn data analytical programming now after I spent my entire 20s getting high. And once I really getting rid of that mindset has helped me succeed to learn this stuff, because I don't limit myself with it.
And that's what's good about this book. It gives it a practical method on how to do what you did, where you went from addiction to now you've just, congratulations, moved into a new place. How did that happen? Well, it's because you put effort, you gave it attention. Nothing happens by chance. And Andrew, of course, has come to our program. He shared his story. Hopefully you'll do it again, Andrew. Okay, then the next one in the faster method is ACT. Education is not a passive sport. What is one thing you could do to make this experience better? So basically, and I'll mix the two. I'll stay on this one for now. Right now, because in education, when you go to school, how many of you remember that you were very interactive in the class? The teachers were kept asking you questions and so on. Very few. When you ask most kids and most adults, how was school? What do you remember? What's the first word everybody comes?
Boring.
Boring. So if you act and it's in a boring state, are you going to be able to be engaged? So he says, what's one thing when you're learning something that you're not into, let's say reading this book or wanting to learn something new, that you could write down to have a better act? And he gives you tips on how to do that. And it's mixed with your state, which is the S. The way you think, act, the way you think and feel is your state of being. The way you think, act, and feel is your personality. And your personality determines your personal reality. So if you don't like your reality, you need to change the way you think, act, and feel. But it starts with your thinking and feeling. So how did you like school? Most people quizzed. It was boring. So if it's boring and you're in a boring state and your physiology is not into it, your breaths are not into it, what's happening to your mind when you're bored? What's happening? Where is it? Like right now, if you're listening to me,
I'm the present.
are you here with me? No.
Yes.
If I'm not engaging you and you're bored listening to me,
Yeah.
where's your mind? It's someplace else.
Somewhere else, wandering around.
And then you ask, what did I just say? And the person, and I sometimes I do that to our students. I'll give you $1 million, $10,000. I'll give you all the money in my pocket. What did I just say? And everybody else will raise their hand. I know. And I said, but you heard words, you heard a sound, but they'll have no idea because their mind was someplace else. That's why there's no better sweet spot than the present moment. And if you think about it, that's the gift. Think of the word present. It's a gift. So if you ever want to have a gift from God, it's always be in the present moment. Don't worry about the past. Don't worry about the future. Be present. And think of the word present as gift. So how do you change your state? He gives the example of meditations, breathing, get excited of what you would do with your knowledge. Anybody who was really bad in school, but then they found something they got excited about, what happened to their grades? They skyrocketed.
Mm-hmm.
If anybody would like to share experience, I know my, if people who weightlift, they'll read, people who've never read books, they'll read hundreds of books on weightlifting or tens of books on weightlifting. Why? Because they got excited. So that's why it's very important to find a purpose in life. Because if you don't get excited for something, it's because you don't have a purpose. And if you don't have a purpose, that means you're living somebody else's life. So if you're waking up every day sad and depressed, could be multiple reasons. Could be because of the way you eat. There's just a sidebar. If you have 8 servings of vegetables and fruits a day, it's a linear relationship to depression. your depression level go way down when your fruit and vegetable intake goes way up. And they concluded that 8 servings a day. So like today I had kale, I had blueberries, I had a few other things. I had, I can't even remember. And so I probably had 3 or 4 servings. I had a banana. And I know I'll probably have 3 or 4 more to even be happier than I was today. Okay, one of the other ways to improve your state, obviously, is breathing exercises, the Wim Hof breathing, and other things. You know, change the way you breathe. It also helps you with becoming present and making sure that you enjoy what you're doing. So he did a quick start. He said, how motivated, energized you are at this moment. Rate your current state on a scale of 1 to 10. And what is one thing you'll do right now to increase that number? So right now, if I were to ask you, what's your scale? What's your state between 1 and 10? And most people in COVID, we're noticing suicide. What's most people's scales? They're very low. If you guys would like, type in your numbers. Where do you feel you're at right now? Type it in. I'll take a quick peek at them. So everybody share.
I don't know if, okay, this is, I'm here.
I'm trying to find the chat. Can anybody read? I can't find the chat for some reason because I think I'm sharing. Can anybody read the chat? What are the numbers they're seeing?
I can't see any numbers. There's nothing.
Yeah, I can see some numbers. Yeah, so
yeah.
Okay, so
6, 7, 8, 9.
okay, so for most of us, the scale is pretty good. What is one thing you will do right now to increase that number? What's one thing we could do right now?
Meditate.
You can meditate. What else?
close
Anybody can
distractions.
What does it say? It?
So probably there are so many distractions around, so just shut off those distractions.
Say it is joining us from New Zealand. So we have somebody from, I know somebody from Australia and somebody from New Zealand's participating. So let's welcome him. So say, what was the answer?
I'm thinking shutting down the distractions, so that can help.
So if you're listening to me and on the iPhone, right, your mind is distracted. What else could we do? Let's say you're listening to something that is not enjoyable. How about you reflect and say, wait, maybe there's something within this that could help me in that future that could open up that door. And if I don't pay attention to it, how am I going to open up that door? And if I go back in history in my life, that's when my life changed. Is I had a few incidents where I paid careful attention to somebody giving me advice, even though I was doing something else at the time. And those were the times that my life changed. So it's very important to change your state. It's either through meditation or realigning and asking yourself questions. And the book talks about that. So the next thing in the faster method is teach. So what was the first one for the faster method? Was to, what is it?
Forget.
Forget. And then what was the A?
Act.
Act. What was the S?
State.
The state we're in, the way you think and feel. And what was the T? The T is teach. How do you know? How do you understand? There's a book called Understanding. How do you truly know? I wrote a book. Somebody went and found the 30 top people on what was understanding to them. They wrote a book on it. And they concluded, when do you truly understand something is when what?
You teach it.
You can teach it. And what's good about when you learn something, like Andrew, you and your wife, you're reading. How will you know if you could retain it is when you share it with each other. This is what I learned today. And those are the best relationships. And then when you do learn something, you learn it twice as fast. You learn it twice because now you're giving it back. Because Andrew, now I'm going to quiz you. If you don't remember it or teach it to somebody else or go back to it within 1 hour, how much what you just learned forgot after 1 hour?
Within an hour?
Yeah.
50%.
And after 24 hours?
90%.
Yeah. So is it important for you and your wife to always have that dialogue together?
Yes.
You and anybody. Okay, and then the under faster, the E is enter. How many of us put in our calendar things for work, meetings for work, meetings for people? How many of us have in our calendar personal growth and development time, exercise time?
I do.
But you notice most people don't. And studies show if you don't put it within your calendar, then you're basically telling your subconscious it's not important. So he said, he couldn't emphasize enough, put these things within your calendar. Time for you to meditate, put it in your calendar. Time for you to read, put it in your calendar. And take it easy. It could be, for some of us who don't read at all, your calendar could be just opening the book and closing. That's it. And you accomplish your goal. That way, anything that you do is extra. That way you don't judge yourself. You don't be too harsh to yourself. What is one thing you guys should think that you should start putting into your calendar? What's one thing everybody would like to commit to? Either text it or say it.
Finishing my Limitless book.
Finishing your Limitless book within, you want to give usually a time frame. You want to try to do it, let's say in a week, 2 weeks. Sister Hajar, what's one thing you want to add to your self-development?
Starting Limitless and reading at least 30 minutes a day.
Okay, reading 30 minutes a day. Brother, say it.
Yes, I read this chapter last night, so it was quite interesting when, Jim mentioned that you put an alarm of 25 minutes, like a timer,
Right.
and set a time for reading. So that time you don't have any distraction, just focusing purely onto reading. So I found that quite useful. I did actually put in my calendars, between 7 a.m. till 7:30, I'll be, just dedicating to read.
Right. And what's interesting, and I didn't know this, back in 2000, and I'll share with me, back in 2007, I got married in 2006. Okay. And I decided to start a youth group. We rented the gym, and I would teach kids how to pray. We'd give these types of talks. And this is where we started. But I put it in my calendar. I said, at this time, nothing gets in between. Zero when it comes to this. So I wouldn't go on vacations. I wouldn't do anything. I always say my wife has been happily married for 13 years. I'm sorry, I've been happily married for 13 years. Well, my wife has probably been happily married for 3 years, right? It's because I put so much emphasis on those things. But the reason why we were able to achieve what we did is I didn't allow anything to get in between that. Okay? We talked about entering. Andrew, what was your wife's name again?
Hannah.
What is it?
Hannah.
Hannah. What's one thing?
You do it with the people in the class.
I know, I forgot. Hannah, what's one thing that you think you should enter into your calendar?
Meditate. I have a goal that for a month, and slowly add 5 minutes the next month until I reach 20 minutes a day.
Okay. And now if you hold each other accountable, what's the likelihood that you would probably do those things?
100%.
Very high.
Now who holds who more accountable?
Selves.
Okay, you don't have to answer. My guess, Andrew, it's your wife.
Yeah.
All right. Then the last thing in the faster method is review. What did you learn the lesson before? There's a famous quote that they use. I really liked it. Somebody asked, what is life to you? He said, life is the C between B and D. And what does the C stand for? Choices. The B is for birth, the D is death. The reason why you're here right now with me is you decided to make a choice. The reason why you'll either end up in the lowest of lows or the highest of highs is the choices that you make. That's it. It's that simple. And what are the choices that you think you should start making? And what are the choices you think you should stop making? And then he gave I'll give some examples that he gave in terms of choices. He said, Do what we know. Make a real resolution. When we write things down, we're more likely to finish. Even post it on social media. That's how you be accountable. Say, people have posted on social media their credit debt and said, we're not going to use their credit, and they would stop using their credit. They would make things public to make themselves feel accountable. That's work. I don't think we need to go to that extreme. Why do we forget what we just read? He went through, he said, why do we forget what we just read? Anybody ever read something and you forgot everything you just read? The last like 3 pages, and or you're watching something, you have no idea what you just watched.
All the time.
That happens to everybody.
Mhm.
And then he concludes the reason why, and we're going to talk about the question, is because we're not asking the right questions. And he gives great step for all of us to use of when we're about to do something. Make sure you ask these 3 fundamental questions. And we're going to talk about, where'd it go? Because there's a word I'm looking for in the slide. It's
It's a lie.
How can I use it? What must
Yeah,
I? Is this?
but I forgot the word that he used. Is determination question, or I forgot the word that he used. But but he used the example of like Will Smith, and he got invited to Will Smith's movie set, and it's 3 o'clock in the morning, and he's talking to Will Smith about the types of questions that you should ask, and he asked Will Smith, well, what are you thinking of right now? He says, I'm thinking of how at 3 o'clock in the morning to make this a magical experience for everybody, because they're all just sitting around. So what did Will Smith decide to do? Because he asked that question, he did a barbecue at 3 o'clock in the morning, and he made everybody laugh, and everybody loved it. But how did he get there? Is he asked the right question. If he didn't ask the question, how am I going to make this a magical experience? He would have never have gotten the answer. Your answer only comes through questions. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yes.
He also talked about pugs. Without me talking, anybody know the story about pugs that would like to share? The pug dog. Basically, his sister or somebody, a family member, birthday was coming up, and she would keep sending him pictures of pugs. It's a dog. He's like, oh, she probably wants that at my birthday. So he gave pugs attention. So what did he start seeing everywhere? Pug dogs.
Yeah.
People at the street, people at the supermarket. He says they're everywhere on the internet. He says they were always there, but now I started giving it attention. So you notice, you ever like start thinking of somebody and then they appear and so on? Wherever you keep having the same thoughts will eventually manifest itself. And it could have been in front of you the whole time. So the reason why you haven't gotten where you're at, where you want to be sometimes, it's because you're maybe not asking the right questions. Does that make sense to everybody?
Mm-hmm.
And when you start doing that, how is it that when they've injected people with saline and they told them it's morphine, where they feel no pain? Because what was the question that they probably asked themselves? Who would like to dabble at that? When they were being injected with the saline.
I'm gonna feel better.
I'm gonna feel better. What else? This is going to
The
work,
cure.
right? They would give them these thoughts, and then these thoughts become true, even though it wasn't morphine. How about people that were given a knee surgery where their knee wasn't even touched, and compared to people who did have the real knee surgery? 6 years later, they went back to those people. What was the result between the two?
The same.
Same. So you notice, if you give things the right attention, the right things happen if you ask the right question. So here's the question that he asked, and I'll read it from the book. He says, if you prep your mind with the right kind of questions before you read, you'll see answers, the example, pug dogs everywhere, just by asking the right questions in life. For that reason, I place specific questions throughout this book. To start you off, here are the the dominant questions. We should all have a dominant question. And he used 3 as an example. Will Smith's dominant question at that moment was, how can I make this a magical experience? Your dominant question should be, while you're listening to me right now, how can I use this? Why must I use this? When will I use this? Do you know, now let's say you're about to go listen to a lecture or a teacher or watch something on TV like a documentary. And then you ask these questions before you do it, indulge. What will happen? Let's say you have a meeting. You're going to get answers. You know, I was watching Michael Jordan. Did you guys watch The Last Dance? Anybody watch? Andrew, did you watch The Last Dance, Michael Jordan? Anyways, I was watching it and I said, how am I going to use this? Because at the same time, I was reading this book, this chapter. The first part, Michael Jordan is a rookie. He's at the hotel room. And he's looking for his friends. It's midnight, the other basketball players. He goes and knocks on the door, the hotel door. He opens it, and he sees women on one side with the guys. He sees drugs, and he sees the cocaine, and he sees the gambling. They told him, come on in. And he said, if I go into this room, my whole career is over. He had his whole career flashed in front of him. If he would have made that one choice. And because he didn't, he said, all those players that were in that room were gone within a year. Why was he able to do that? He asked the right questions. We're going to skip this. I'm going to skip this. Quick start. What is one dominant question you should ask yourself? So right now, write it down or do it later. What's one dominant question today? And I want to share you my experience today. And I'll share this, and then I'll give you a second. I've been doing a lot of meditations, different meditations. You know, we've been taking the cold bath and been doing the Wim Hof, even underwater. And I had a dominant question. I said, you know, there was a person who somebody reached out for help, and that person didn't ignore or forgot, or something happened, and he didn't reach out to that person ended up committing suicide. So it really shook my foundation because he's somebody that we knew really closely. Because when I called the father said, I reached out to this, you know, somebody, they weren't able to help, so on and so forth. So it just put me in flux because I was going through all the people I've been helping, and something kept popping up. I have a toxicity. So I asked a dominant question. I said, God, show me if this is good for me to keep helping, to keep going, because it was bugging me. So I did the meditation. I asked the dominant question. Then you get out of the way. I get 2 separate texts about the same person that was random. And that brought me information that I was able to make a clear decision right after I did the meditation. That happened to me today. And I was like, wow, that was fast. But why did that come? Just like the pug dog, is because I asked the right question. Anybody like to share their dominant question that they wrote down? Well, I want to get at least one person. Anybody?
I think one thing I always used to think is how to become a better person, and it's an ongoing process. So I think I've been asking myself that question time and again.
Right. So
Yeah.
we went over the 40 hadith, the 15th hadith before you jumped on. And the way you're going to become a better person is God is going to try you. Heavy. And the closer you get to God, Prophet Ibrahim was tried. And that's how he became an imam. It's through heavy trial. So when you ask that question, always expect a trial right after that. And that trial will determine where you're at the level of God. That's just the way the world works. And then in 2 weeks from now, we're going to talk about how to have patience. There's 7 types of patience. How to have patience through those trials. Because sometimes we wish for things and we don't get it. And God tries you with that, and God tells you, well, if you would have gotten it, you would have been away from me further. You know, there's a famous narration where a person kept asking the prophet, give me money, pray for money, pray for me for money. Eventually he prayed. And then for the next 3 months, the prophet never saw him. Then the person came back, said, you're back. He said, yeah, when you prayed for money, I forgot God. Then I was missing God, and God took everything away from me. Now I'm back next to you. So the point is, that's the trial in life.
One question I have, Hussein, if I may ask. you know, there is one thing which we think that our question is, and there is one thing which is our existential question. I don't know whether this is the right word to ask, but
Huh?
I mean, we are really asking for that, and that's what really happens. So, I mean, are we, and we are, I think we are all in a different state of being a question in ourselves, you know. So I mean, be it somebody might be needing to become more financially stable, somebody needs more tranquility inside. uh, it does varies, right? So how would you say that question, is it just like a sort of question which has come out of your mind, or it is like part of you, you know, what you really want?
Right. And that, see, the question that you want to ask yourself, for me, my dominant question is, God, sometimes it is, what is it about myself and my low desires that's keeping me away from you? And God will show you. So, and one of the ways to do it is the Imam told us, and I'm gonna share it with you guys, and we could all do it. And here's this famous narration. It says, if you want to know where your heart is, because that's what you just basically asked, correct?
Yeah.
So look how fast you got the answer from the Imam. He says, see where your mind goes when it wanders. So basically, I did this with somebody earlier today. Just what you do is you try to think of nothing. You know, Muhammad Berry, if he's in, he could talk about how to think of no thing, you know, how to go into that state. But when you think of nothing, you close your eyes, where does your mind wander? So for the person that I was asking, they said, my mind is wandering. I want to go back to Vail. I want to go hiking, nature, because I was in my lowest of lows. And when I went nature walking, it removed a lot of my problems in life. And that's where their mind took. I said, I got to go back there. Oh my God, I forgot about that. For me, when I've done it and my mind wanders, it could be towards something that I know I should stop doing. I'm like, oh, I have this toxic relationship, or oh, I have this bad habit. And my mind keeps going there.
Yep.
Because that's where your heart is. So that's a tip for everybody. After this is over, just take that 30 seconds or 3 minutes or 30 minutes and just let your mind, just let it go. See where it wanders. You know, it can wander to many places. You know, for some men, it could be closing their eyes and their mind is wandering towards other women. So then they have to ask themselves, wait, why is that happening? For some people, it's towards gambling. And that's when the best moment to say, this is something I need to improve on. And look at the tip that Imam Ali gave us. Andrew, you want to talk about that in your experience? In terms of where your mind was wandering when you were in the addiction phase of your life compared to now? Because where was your mind wandering when you wanted the addiction? Like if you were to do it back then, and if you were put your mind back then, where would it probably wander if you closed your eyes?
Oh, it was in a pretty dark place. I mean, my mind wandered on basically looking for opportunity to take advantage of people, to steal, to, you know, where basically it was just fixated and totally obsessed with getting high. So I mean, I closed my eyes and my mind was, that's all that it was focused on, eventually 24/7.
And you said to focus on taking advantage of people. And because your mind wandered there, did you eventually take advantage of people?
Oh yeah, I mean that's what I got arrested for, was breaking into someone's house and stealing, and
Right.
then I went, yeah, I stole and manipulated and did a lot of different things like that just to be able to support.
And now when you close your eyes and your mind wanders, where does it go?
Sometimes it goes into like some deep abyss of data analytics that I'm trying to solve.
Right.
Because I enjoy that a lot, but it also goes just to it goes to wanting to, what can I do for my kids and for my wife?
Now think about the difference. So what was the difference between, it's just now where your mind wanders. You look and you apply and you got an interview today for what job?
A SQL data engineer.
Right. So you've been, and when your mind wanders, it wanders towards data analysis. So if your mind is wandering towards addiction, towards taking advantage, towards cheating somebody, you're going to get that.
Well,
Because that's where your heart is going.
The fascinating thing, I mean, if anybody has experienced anybody that's been in addiction and seen how a lot of rehabs go, a lot of rehabilitation facilities, the piece that they're missing was kind of the piece that I picked up at this this faith-based, the Christian rehab that I went to. The thing that they said is, you don't have a disease, you have a heart issue.
Yes.
That's what they told us. That's the first thing they say when you walk in the door. You don't have a medical condition, you don't have a disease, you have a heart issue. Let's address the heart issue and go from there.
Right. And we know we're the most successful places that have addiction recovery are the ones that have the spirit component. Because there's four. There's your behavioral, there's the psychological, there's the social, and the most important, one of the most, is the spiritual. If you want to recover from suicide or addiction, you probably have a problem in all four. And you have to attack all four.
Yeah.
Change your brain, change your life. You know, Dr. Daniel Amen goes deeper into this. I just want to go, I shared this, somebody was asking in terms of manifestation. What does the Quran say about that? And this is, you know, when somebody was, sustenance was taken away and they're going through trials and tribulations, and he gave him sustenance from whence he thinks not, meaning it's going to come unexpected. And that's the point. If you change things, that means something's going to change, as meaning to be unexpected. But if you do the same things, then the same things are going to keep happening. And Quran talks about that. Allah attains his purpose. Allah indeed is appointed a measure for everything, meaning it's all going to come. And then another one, and we'll go over then any questions from you guys, and then we'll end. O Prophet, say to those of the captives who are in your hands. So these are the people that were caught by the Prophet. Okay? It says, if God knows anything good in your heart, anything, he will give you better than which has been taken away. So right now we've been taken away. Some of us jobs, some of us family. God says, be patient. Even prisoners of God was given better than the situation that was taken from. Don't you think God is going to give you? Do you know Pharaoh? You know, I just listened to a series of lectures where the Pharaoh was asked for forgiveness right before he was died. And a scholar was proving from the Quran that God gave him forgiveness. Whoa. Why is that important? Because if God is going to forgive Pharaoh who killed people, you don't think God will forgive you for your mistakes and your sins? So for instance, Andrew, whatever he's done, 99.999% of it, God has probably forgiven most of it. And I could prove that through the Quran. But God is saying, now what? Andrew, you want a higher state of elevation? Well, guess what, Andrew? You're going to be tested even more. And you're going to be loved more. And what's another thing, unfortunately? You're going to be hated more. And that's just the way the world works. Any comments? I could read the chats now. Any questions? Anything before we end? Any feedback, please. WhatsApp me. Tell me how I can make this more interactive. With me, you guys know I love when his physical audience is there because I feed off the energy, and that's where my whole, but I'm learning. Any questions, any feedback? Okay, who would like to review the FASTER method, the acronym? Who can remember the FASTER? The F is for?
Forget.
Forget. A
Act.
is for?
Act.
S is for?
Stating.
T?
Teach.
E?
Enter.
Enter. What is the one thing we should enter in our calendar? Remember, and then the R is for?
Review.
Review. So now, what are the three questions we should ask?
When, why, where?
I can use it.
When I could use it, why will I use it, and how
Where?
will I use it? Right? If you ask the right questions, you will get the answers. Muhammad, you'd like to add anything before we end? Anything at all? Me and Muhammad have been having some really good conversations lately. Muhammad, hurry.
Wait, I have.
Yeah, go ahead. And then
Okay,
Muhammad, you
so
could add in.
for the part where we discussed the Imam Ali quote, where if you want to know where you're at, you just have to see where your mind wanders. So if it goes to a bad place, that means that that's what you need to work on to eliminate that bad.
Mm-hmm. So for instance, Andrew's mind was going towards addiction, using people. So he's got to now ask the question, how can I stop this from happening? That's the key. That's a great tool. And when I do it, sometimes I'll do it deeply and sometimes I don't like what I see. I say, there's something I really got to change.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Muhammad.
Sometimes where your mind wanders is just a thought that you didn't really get to go into deep enough in order to really figure out what's going on there. So it's something that you haven't really resolved or solved. It doesn't necessarily have to be bad or good, but it's something you should give attention to complete that thought all the way through.
Right.
Feel out all the scenarios and feel out, and then realize, well, is that on my mind, One way to do this is when we go to sleep, you can sleep journal. You can set a timer and find out what's going on in the subconscious. And then come back and get, really? That's what I dreamed of? And you can search and all that stuff and get deeper into it.
Right. And then also, right when you wake up, think about what you were dreaming. It's really important. Why is it kids, and another review question, why is it that kids can't remember the periodic table or can't remember the math concept? Sister Mahreen, I'll pick on you. Why are kids not able to memorize certain things? Why most kids are not going to remember the periodic table? Because in school, what state are they in?
Bored.
They're bored.
Yeah.
So whatever we go into, make sure you're all in and you're into it and you're excited. One thing I like about Muhammad, he's always in a joyful mood. It could be thundering, the plane could be crashing. So this is God's plan, and he's always in that mood. I've never seen him discouraged, no matter what.
I want to know what her follow-up question was, what she was saying after. She said something after. What was it?
Oh, I asked about the dreams. You said that how we know where we're at in terms of dream. I mean, like emotionally or on a mental level is what we dream of. But I wanted to know what that actually represents, because sometimes it's very random.
Not really what we dream of. I'm just saying, if you take a journal, if you figure out when you're in the REM sleep, when you're going through that stage of sleep where you wake up, if you start noting it and you keep a journal for a while, you can start trying to figure out what this might mean.
Great. If you do it, how do you get into that state when you take a shower? Right before you go to sleep, right after you go to sleep. My biggest meditations where I've been in a different place is when I was really tired. Because remember, you have different brain waves. So it's really good. In regards to dreams, we know there's 3 types of dreams. But one of the things about dreams, it's all about you. So if you sin a lot in your dream, that means it's a wake-up call that there's some type of change. But there's dreams that mean nothing. But usually many of your dreams, the closer you get as a believer, the clearer your dreams become. And you could actually use your dreams just like you could use angels to help you open up doors. And now we have scientists. Joe Dispenza talks about 12-foot angels coming to heal people. Today, somebody was doing a meditation, level 4 cancer cured. And it's happening every day through thought alone. Because if your thoughts could heal your knee from a surgery that never happened, and that could have the same impact as a surgery, then what else can your thoughts do? And do you need to be tricked in terms of your knee being healed? Or can you do it on your own? And absolutely. And that's the reason why we have this, is to get everybody their free will back to manifest. We're going to talk about what happened in Minnesota, where the guys, Colin Kaepernick put a knee down and everybody put an uproar. Now this cop puts a knee down. And it's sad. It's a real, real sad situation. It's sickening. Every time I see the video, I change it. And every time I see that, I say, what if that was my son or daughter in that situation? Okay. Any last input? Any input before we go? Please, any feedback that you have, direct message me. Anybody else that doesn't have video on that would like to share before we go? Okay, I'll pick the chapter for next week that we're gonna go. We're gonna continue on Hadith 15 and 16. And remember, we don't go over all of Limitless. We pick a few chapters and then we go to the next book. But I encourage, Limitless is a really good book on to learn how to learn. I believe it's a book that's a gateway for all other books to read. Now when you read a book, now you're asking questions. Remember, don't read for an hour straight. You take 25 minutes, then you take a break. 10 minutes, take a break. Teach it to somebody else. And let's work together on this. Okay? I have some other exciting books that I can't wait for us to read together. Let's get through this one, inshallah, open up. Okay? Thank you, everybody. Really enjoyed it. Next week, I even want it more interactive, where it's less me talking, more of you. And let's do this together, inshallah. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Haj.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hussein. Thanks for organizing.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.